Evelyn Mercer woke with her hands at her throat and a scream caught in her chest. She was not in Boston. She was not in the dark cellar with the locked door and the smell of damp stone. But for a few long seconds her mind refused to understand that. She could still hear Nathaniel Prescott's voice in her ear, calm and controlled, telling her that she belonged to him and always would. Her whole body shook. "They broke me," she whispered into the darkness of the small ranch bedroom. "I think they finally broke me." A chair scraped softly beside the bed. Grayson Hale was already awake. He had been sleeping in that chair for 3 nights, ever since the telegram arrived. He stood slowly so he would not startle her, and turned up the lamp just enough to push back the worst of the shadows. "You're safe," he said in a steady, low voice. It was just a dream. He did not reach for her right away. He had learned that sudden movement could send her into panic. Instead, he stayed where she could see him, and let her breathing settle before he moved closer. Evelyn pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes and forced herself to look around. Wooden walls, a braided rug, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, snow tapping lightly against the window. This was Grayson's ranch outside Silver Ridge. This was Wyoming, not Massachusetts. She swallowed and tried to steady herself. "He's coming," she said. "The sheriff's telegram said he left 3 days ago. He won't stop until he drags me back." Grayson pulled the chair closer and sat down again, facing her directly. "Let him come," he said. "He won't drag you anywhere." His jaw tightened as he spoke, but his voice stayed calm. He had been a soldier once. He knew how to keep fear from showing. "Sheriff Brogan's watching him. Judge Harlan set the hearing for Monday. We do this by the law." She gave a short, broken laugh. "The law never helped me before." Her fingers twisted in the edge of the quilt. "Doctors signed papers saying I was unstable. Neighbors believed him. His mother said I should be grateful he tolerated my moods." The old humiliation burned as much as the bruises ever had. "You don't know what he can do." Grayson studied her carefully. He had known her for 8 months, but he did not pretend to understand everything. "You're right," he said. "I don't know all of it, but I know this. You walked away. You crossed half the country alone. That don't sound broken to me." The words stayed between them. Broken. She had felt that way since the first winter of her marriage, when she realized the charming banker who brought her roses in public liked to lock doors in private. Nathaniel Prescott never raised his voice when other people were near. He preferred to speak softly, like a teacher correcting a slow student. The first time he struck her, he apologized afterward and bought her a bracelet. The second time, he told her she had imagined it. The third time, he locked her in the cellar overnight and told the doctor she suffered from nervous hysteria. She had believed, for a while, that maybe she did. It had taken 7 years for that belief to crack. She met Grayson's eyes now. "You don't have to fight him for me," she said quietly. "This is my mess." Quote. Grayson leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I'm fighting because I want to," he said, "and because I didn't once before." He did not say his sister's name, but it hung in the air. Hannah Hale had married a man who smiled at church and drank himself mean at night. By the time Grayson came home from war, she had been buried 2 years. No one had called it murder. They had called it a tragedy. Evelyn saw that memory in his eyes and understood. Morning came gray and bitter cold. Frost clung to the porch railing, and the sky looked like pressed tin. Jake Moreno rode in just after sunrise, his horse lathered from hard riding. "They're in town," he called as he swung down. "Prescott and 4 men." Went straight to the hotel. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. For a moment, she could not feel her feet on the floor. Grayson moved to stand beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "You can stay here," he said. "No one will think less of you." She closed her eyes briefly. For years she had stayed quiet to keep peace. She had swallowed words, swallowed pain, swallowed fear. It had nearly swallowed her in return. When she opened her eyes again, they were clearer. "No," she said. "I'm done hiding." Red Hollow's main street was unusually still when they arrived. Word had spread overnight. People watched from doorways and windows. Sheriff Brogan stood near the hotel entrance, one hand resting near his holster. The hotel door opened, and Nathaniel Prescott stepped out like a man arriving at a business meeting instead of a confrontation. He looked exactly as she remembered. Immaculate coat, silver at his temples, calm expression that suggested reason and restraint. He smiled when he saw her. "Evelyn," he said warmly, "thank God. I've been worried sick." Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice, but she did not step back. "Don't come closer," she said. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then it returned. "You're confused," he told the crowd in a tone meant to reassure. "My wife has been unwell for some time. I came to take her home." Quote, "I ran because you locked me in a cellar," she said clearly. A murmur spread down the boardwalk. Nathaniel sighed, as if burdened. "You see," he told the sheriff, "this is what I've been dealing with." Sheriff Brogan cleared his throat. "Petition for divorce was filed yesterday," he announced. "Grounds of cruelty. Hearings Monday." Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. "Cruelty? That's absurd." Evelyn felt Grayson step closer behind her, not touching, but there. "You told the doctor I imagined bruises," she said. "You told the neighbors I fainted downstairs. You told me no one would believe me." She lifted her chin. "You were wrong." For the first time, anger cracked through his polished expression. He took a step toward her. "You belong to me," he hissed under his breath. She felt the old fear try to rise, but it did not take hold. "I belong to myself," she answered. He lunged then, fast enough that several people gasped. Grayson moved without hesitation. His fist connected with Nathaniel's jaw in a sharp, solid strike that knocked him backward into the snow. Silence followed, heavy and complete. "Touch her again," Grayson said quietly, "and you won't leave this town standing." Nathaniel pushed himself up, blood bright against his white collar. His eyes were no longer calm. They were furious and uncertain. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for me," Evelyn replied. That night, the nightmare returned harder than before. She saw the cellar door closing. She felt his hand at her throat. She heard him whisper that she would never escape him. She woke, screaming, the sound tearing out of her before she could stop it. Grayson was at her side instantly. He did not grab her. He simply spoke. "Evelyn, you're here. You're safe. It's just a dream." His voice cut through the panic like a rope thrown into deep water. She grabbed his shirt with both hands. "They broke me," she sobbed. "I'm never going to be normal again." He shook his head firmly. "They tried," he said, "and they failed." She searched his face, looking for doubt, for pity, for anything that suggested he did not believe what he was saying. She found none. "What if I can't stop being afraid?" she whispered. "Then I'll sit here every night until you can," he answered. He pulled the chair close to the bed and settled into it, crossing his arms but keeping his eyes open. Snow drifted softly past the window. The ranch was quiet except for the wind and the low crackle of the fire in the other room. Evelyn lay back slowly. Her body still trembled, but not as violently. She kept her gaze fixed on him in the lamplight. For the first time in years, she knew that when she closed her eyes, someone would still be there when she opened them again. Outside, winter covered Silver Ridge in white. Inside, the cowboy kept watch until dawn. The hearing was set for Monday morning, but Sunday felt longer than any day Evelyn could remember. Word had spread through Red Hollow that the wealthy banker from Boston had come to reclaim his wife. People pretended to go about their business, but conversations lowered when she passed. Some faces showed sympathy, others showed doubt. She understood that doubt. For years, she had doubted herself. Grayson rode into town early with Jake to speak with Sheriff Brogan and Judge Harlan. Evelyn stayed at the ranch and tried to keep her hands busy. She swept the kitchen floor twice. She folded the same stack of linens 3 different ways. She even attempted to read, but the words blurred together. Every sound outside made her heart jump. Every distant hoofbeat sent cold fear through her chest. By mid-afternoon, Grayson returned. His expression was controlled, but she saw the tension in his shoulders the moment he stepped inside. He removed his gloves slowly and set them on the table. "He's hired a lawyer," Grayson said. "Brought him all the way from Boston." Evelyn let out a slow breath. "Of course he did." "They're claiming you're unstable," Grayson continued. "Saying you suffered an episode and ran off without reason." She almost smiled at that. "He's used that word for years, episode." Grayson stepped closer. "Judge Harlan isn't impressed by polished shoes and city talk. But he'll need proof. More than your word against his." Quote, Evelyn moved to the window and looked out at the snow-covered pasture. "I kept copies," she said quietly. "Copies of what?" "The letters from Dr. Morrison, the receipts." She turned to face him. "Nathaniel paid him to diagnose me with nervous hysteria. I found the transfer records. I hid copies in my luggage before I left." Quote, Grayson's eyes sharpened. "You still have them?" Quote, "In my trunk upstairs." She hesitated. "I didn't think I would ever use them. I just wanted something that proved I wasn't imagining it." He nodded once. "That's exactly what we need." Sunday evening, Sheriff Brogan rode out to the ranch himself. He dismounted heavily and removed his hat as he stepped inside. He tried to file commitment papers. The sheriff said bluntly. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Tonight?" "Lawyer claimed you're a danger to yourself. Said you've been making threats against your husband's reputation." Brogan snorted. "Judge refused. Said there's no evidence of instability." Grayson folded his arms. "And Prescott?" In a foul mood. The sheriff looked at Evelyn directly. He's not used to being told no. She knew that better than anyone. That night she did not sleep at all. She lay awake listening to the wind and remembering the early days of her marriage. Nathaniel had been attentive then. Charming. He had taken her to dinners and introduced her proudly. The first time he corrected her in public, he had squeezed her hand so hard under the table she nearly cried out. He smiled the whole time. "You embarrassed me," he had whispered later. By the third year, she had stopped speaking at gatherings altogether. The memory made her chest tighten. She pushed it away and sat up in bed. The door opened quietly. Grayson stood there as if he had sensed her wakefulness. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." He stepped inside and leaned against the wall. "You don't have to be strong every second." She gave him a tired look. "I'm not trying to be strong. I'm trying not to fall apart." He walked closer, careful as always, and rested his hand lightly on the bedpost. "You won't fall alone." Monday morning arrived clear and cold. The sky was sharp blue, and the courthouse looked small against the wide stretch of snow beyond it. Red Hollow had never seen such a crowd for a hearing. Ranchers, shopkeepers, wives, even children stood outside, waiting. Evelyn wore a simple dark blue dress she had sewn herself in the months since arriving in town. It was plain, but it fit well, and she stood straight inside it. Grayson walked beside her. He did not hold her hand. He did not need to. His presence was enough. Nathaniel was already inside when they entered. He stood with his lawyer, posture straight, expression composed. When his eyes met hers, something cold passed through them. It was the look he used when she had disappointed him. Judge Harlan called the room to order. "We are here to determine the validity of Mrs. Evelyn Mercer's petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty." Nathaniel's lawyer rose first. He spoke in a smooth voice about misunderstandings and medical concerns. He described Evelyn as delicate and emotionally unstable. He referenced physicians in Boston who had treated her for hysteria. Evelyn listened without interrupting. The words sounded so familiar she almost felt as if she had stepped backward in time. When the lawyer finished, Judge Harlan turned to her. "Mrs. Mercer, do you wish to respond?" She stood slowly. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. "Yes, Your Honor." She walked to the front of the courtroom and unfolded a small packet of papers. "These are bank transfers from my husband's account to Dr. Morrison. The dates match the week I was diagnosed." She handed them to the clerk. A murmur spread through the room. "There's also a letter," she continued. "Written by my husband to the same doctor, it details what symptoms he wished recorded." Nathaniel went pale, Those are private communications. They are evidence, Judge Harlan said sharply. The judge read in silence for several long seconds. His expression hardened. Nathaniel stepped forward. My wife has always been prone to imagination. She misinterprets events. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Did I imagine the cellar? She asked. Did I imagine the lock? Quote. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Nathaniel's mask slipped. You needed discipline. The word hung in the air. Judge Harlan leaned back in his chair. Mr. Prescott, are you admitting to confinement? Nathaniel hesitated, and in that hesitation Evelyn saw the first crack in his confidence. Sheriff Brogan stepped forward. Your Honor, there are also witnesses prepared to testify to Mrs. Mercer's conduct in this town. She has held steady employment, kept accounts for half the businesses here, and conducted herself with sound judgment. Jake nodded from the back of the room. Evelyn felt something inside her straighten. Judge Harlan set the papers down. Based on the preliminary evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to proceed with the divorce petition. Final determination will follow further review. Mr. Prescott, you are not to approach Mrs. Mercer outside legal proceedings. Nathaniel's face flushed red. This is outrageous. This is Wyoming, the judge replied evenly, and we do not tolerate abuse here. The gavel struck. The room erupted in quiet conversation as people began to stand. Evelyn remained where she was for a moment, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Nathaniel moved toward her before deputies could intervene. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. You think this protects you? He said softly. I can ruin this town. I can ruin him. She met his gaze steadily. You can try. He stared at her for a long moment, as if searching for the frightened girl he once controlled. He did not find her. When he stepped away, Grayson was already there. You all right? He asked. Evelyn exhaled slowly. I don't know. He nodded. That's honest? Outside, the crowd parted as they stepped into the sunlight. For the first time, she did not feel like prey walking through a field of watchers. She felt seen. But as they mounted their horses and rode back toward the ranch, a cold certainty settled in her chest. Nathaniel Prescott was not finished, and neither, she realized, was she. The first hearing should have brought relief. Instead, it brought tension that sat heavy in Evelyn's chest. Judge Harlan had not dismissed her claims, and that alone was something. But Nathaniel Prescott was not a man who accepted public defeat. He had built his life on control. When control slipped, he tightened his grip. By Wednesday morning, word spread that Nathaniel had filed a counterpetition. He claimed abandonment. He claimed defamation. He claimed she had stolen funds when she left Boston. Sheriff Brogan brought the news himself, his mouth set in a grim line. He's trying to bury you in paperwork, the sheriff said, hoping you'll fold under the weight. Evelyn sat at Grayson's kitchen table, ledger open in front of her, though she had not written a number in several minutes. He always did prefer pressure to force, she said quietly. Force leaves marks. Pressure makes you doubt yourself. Grayson leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. You're not doubting now. She met his eyes. Not about what he did, but I am worried about what he might do next. That worry proved justified by afternoon. Jake rode in again, faster this time, his face tight with concern. He's been asking questions, Jake said without preamble. About you, about the ranch, about Grayson. Evelyn's fingers stilled on the page. Questions how? Talking to folks who don't know better, saying you're unstable, saying Grayson's harboring another man's wife for his own gain. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he did not speak, Jake continued. And he's not alone. 2 of the men he brought are known for stirring trouble. They were in Carson last winter when a saloon burned down after a dispute. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. Evelyn forced herself to breathe evenly. He wants me rattled, she said. He wants this town to look at me and see scandal. Grayson stepped forward and placed both hands flat on the table. Let him talk, he said. Talk runs out of steam. Truth doesn't. She wanted to believe that, but she had seen how easily lies traveled in Boston drawing rooms. How quickly a woman's reputation could be reshaped by a whisper. That night, She insisted on riding into town herself. Grayson did not like it. She saw that plainly. But he did not forbid it. He never tried to control her movements. He only asked one question. "Are you ready to see him again?" "No," she answered honestly. "But I'm not ready to hide either." Red Hollow was busier than usual. Nathaniel stood outside the general store with his lawyer, speaking to two ranchers. His posture was relaxed, hands folded behind his back, the picture of civility. When he saw her approach, he smiled faintly. "Evelyn," he said, as if greeting her at a dinner party, "you look well." "I am well," she replied. The ranchers shifted awkwardly and excused themselves. They did not want to be caught in the middle. Nathaniel took one step closer. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "For who?" "For you," he said smoothly. "You've tied yourself to a rancher with a questionable temper. That hearing embarrassed me. I don't respond kindly to embarrassment." Grayson stepped up beside her, close but not touching. "You're not welcome near her." Nathaniel's eyes flicked to him. "And you are? Harboring a married woman?" "She filed for divorce," Grayson said evenly. Nathaniel tilted his head. "You think a frontier judge dissolves a marriage like mine? I have friends in higher places." Evelyn felt the old fear try to surface, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "Your friends can't erase bank records." For a moment his composure slipped, just slightly. "You don't understand the game you're playing." "No," she said. "I understand it very well. I just refuse to play by your rules anymore." He studied her carefully, as if measuring how much she had changed. "You were never this defiant before." "I was," she answered quietly. "You just worked very hard to silence it." His jaw tightened. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You will regret humiliating me." Before she could answer, Sheriff Brogan appeared at the edge of the boardwalk. "That's enough," the sheriff called. "Court orders still stand. Keep your distance." Nathaniel straightened, smoothing his coat. "Of course, Sheriff. I wouldn't dream of violating the law." Quote. He tipped his hat and walked away, but the threat lingered in the air long after he disappeared inside the hotel. On the ride back to the ranch, Evelyn's hands trembled on the reins. "You held your ground," Grayson said. "I'm shaking," she admitted. "That don't mean you failed." She gave him a faint smile. "I used to think bravery meant not feeling fear at all." "It means feeling it and not letting it decide for you," he replied. That night, sleep did not come easily. When it did, the dream shifted. She was not in the cellar this time. She was back in Boston, standing in a crowded parlor, while Nathaniel told guests she was delicate and prone to imagination. The guests smiled politely. No one met her eyes. She woke, gasping again. Grayson was there, instantly, as he always was. "Another one?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Different, but the same." He poured her a glass of water and handed it to her carefully. "You faced him today." That stirred things up. She took a sip and stared at the floorboards. "I'm afraid he'll hurt someone else to get to me." Quote. Grayson considered that. He won't find this town easy to push around. He's done worse for less. Silence settled between them. The truth was, neither of them knew how far Nathaniel would go. The next morning brought a new development. Sheriff Brogan arrived with a folded paper in his hand. "Temporary restraining order's been granted," he said. "Prescott is barred from approaching you directly until final judgment." Evelyn felt a cautious sense of relief. "That will stop him?" "It'll slow him," the sheriff corrected. "But a man like that doesn't give up because of paper." As if summoned by the thought, a gunshot cracked in the distance that afternoon. Evelyn dropped the cup she was holding. It shattered against the kitchen floor. Grayson was already moving, grabbing his rifle and stepping onto the porch. Jake came running from the barn. Another shot echoed, closer this time, from the south pasture. Jake called. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. "The cattle." Grayson looked back at her once. "Stay inside." Quote. She wanted to argue, but the urgency in his voice stopped her. Minutes later, Grayson and Jake returned, faces grim. One of the ranch's younger steers lay bleeding near the fence line, a clean shot through the shoulder. No meat taken, no attempt to claim it. A warning, Jake said quietly. Evelyn's throat went dry. He wouldn't. He would, Grayson answered. The reality settled heavy between them. Nathaniel Prescott had not come west merely to reclaim his wife. He had come to break her will. If he could not reach her directly, he would damage what she cared about. That evening, Evelyn stood in the barn doorway, watching as Grayson and Jake tended to the injured animal. The steer would likely survive, but the message had been delivered clearly. Grayson walked toward her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "We'll post watches tonight," he said. "He won't get close again." She looked at him steadily. "He's escalating." "Yes. And he won't stop." Grayson did not deny it. "Then neither will we." The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Silver Ridge. Evelyn felt fear settle deep in her bones, but alongside it came something new. Resolve. Nathaniel had tried intimidation. He had tried humiliation. Now he had tried threat. He was running out of tools, and for the first time since she fled Boston, Evelyn realized she was no longer the one running. The night watches began immediately. Jake took the first shift near the south pasture. 2 ranch hands rotated every 3 hours. Grayson refused to sleep at all. He positioned himself near the front porch with a rifle across his lap and a lantern turned low. Evelyn watched him from the kitchen doorway for a long moment before speaking. "You can't stay awake forever," she said. "I don't plan to," he answered calmly. "Just long enough." She understood what he meant. Long enough to make sure Prescott did not come under cover of darkness. Long enough to prove that intimidation would not drive her back to Boston. Still, guilt pressed against her ribs. "He's doing this because of me." Grayson did not look up from where he sat. "He's doing this because he's a bully who's losing control." Quote, "That doesn't change the cause." "It does," he replied, quietly. "You didn't make him cruel. He was that way long before you." She had no answer for that. The next morning, Sheriff Brogan rode out again. His face was harder than usual. "I questioned Prescott about the shot," he said without preamble. "He denied it." "Of course he did," Jake muttered. Brogan nodded. "Problem is, I've got no proof. No witness. No shell casing left behind. Whoever fired that rifle knew what he was doing." Evelyn felt cold settle in her stomach. Nathaniel had always preferred precision. He liked damage that could not be traced back to him. "He'll push again," she said quietly. Brogan studied her. "You got anything else on him? Anything that could shift this from domestic dispute to criminal investigation?" Evelyn hesitated. There was something she had never shared. Something she had overheard late one evening in Boston, when Nathaniel believed her asleep. A business partner had threatened to expose irregularities in their banking accounts. 3 weeks later, that partner had drowned in the Charles River. Officially, an accident. Privately, she had heard Nathaniel's voice in the study, calm and satisfied, discussing the cost of silence. She looked at Grayson. "I have suspicions," she said carefully. "About a death back east, but no direct proof." Brogan exhaled slowly. "Suspicion won't hold in court." "It might rattle him," Grayson said. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Just be careful. A cornered man can be dangerous." After he left, silence settled heavily in the kitchen. Grayson turned to her. "Tell me what you're thinking." She moved to the table and sat down. "He's not just trying to reclaim me," she said. "He's trying to protect something." "His pride?" "His reputation," she corrected. "If I speak openly about the abuse, it damages him. But if I suggest there are other crimes—" She let the sentence hang. Grayson leaned back slightly. "You think he's capable of more than what he did to you?" "I know he is." The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. That afternoon, Nathaniel made his next move. A rider from town arrived with a folded notice. Prescott's lawyer had filed a motion to delay final divorce proceedings indefinitely, citing new evidence regarding Evelyn's mental state and financial conduct. It accused her of forging documents. It claimed she had manipulated bank transfers before leaving Boston. Evelyn read the paper twice before lowering it slowly. "He's trying to paint me as criminal. He's trying to shift the narrative," Grayson said. "If he can make you look dishonest, your testimony weakens." The strategy was familiar. In Boston, Nathaniel had often accused her of the very things he was doing himself. "You want to respond publicly?" Jake asked. Evelyn considered it. A public statement might defend her reputation, but it would also give Nathaniel more space to twist her words. "No," she said finally. "We respond in court." Grayson nodded approval. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Evelyn walked alone toward the edge of the pasture. The air was sharp with cold. She needed space to think. She needed distance from the walls that now felt charged with tension. She did not hear the horse approach until it was too late. "Evelyn!" Her body froze at the sound of his voice. Nathaniel sat astride a dark bay mare at the fence line. He had no weapon visible, no men beside him, just that calm expression he wore so well. "You're violating the order," she said, though her voice trembled. He smiled faintly. "I'm not approaching, merely observing." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Leave. I wanted to speak without your rancher shadowing you. He's not my shadow." "No," Nathaniel agreed. "He's your crutch." The old sting flared, but she forced herself steady. "Say what you came to say." He studied her face carefully. "You've changed. People do. You were softer once. I was silent once." He shifted slightly in the saddle. "This town will turn on you. They always do. When the novelty fades, when the whispers grow, they will see you as the woman who tore her marriage apart." She felt fear twist in her stomach, but she did not let it show. "You tore it apart." His eyes darkened. "I gave you everything. You gave me a cage." For a moment, something like frustration cracked through his composure. "You think this man can protect you? When this is done, when your reputation is stained and your money gone, he'll tire of the burden." Grayson's voice cut through the cold air before she could respond. "You done talking?" Nathaniel's head turned slightly. Grayson stood several yards away, rifle resting easily in his hands but not raised. Nathaniel gave a thin smile. "Just having a civil conversation. You're trespassing." "I'm on public land." Grayson did not argue the detail. "You've said your piece. Now ride." Nathaniel looked at Evelyn one last time. "You don't understand the consequences yet," he said quietly. "But you will." Then he turned his horse and rode away. Evelyn did not realize she was shaking until Grayson stepped beside her. "You shouldn't have been out here alone," he said, though there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "I won't let him herd me indoors like livestock," she replied. He gave her a faint nod. Fair enough. They walked back toward the house in silence. That night, the nightmare changed again. This time, she stood in a courtroom in Boston, alone, while Nathaniel told a judge she was unstable. No one defended her. No one questioned him. The walls seemed to close in around her. She woke, gasping, clutching the blanket. Grayson was already on his feet. "I'm here," he said. She sat up and looked at him in the lamplight. "He's not afraid," she said. "Not yet. He still thinks he can win." Grayson's jaw tightened slightly. "Then we give him a reason to doubt." She studied him carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that men like Prescott only fear exposure." The idea settled heavily between them. Expose him. The word felt dangerous, powerful, terrifying. If she pursued that path, there would be no quiet resolution, no simple divorce. It would become something larger. Grayson held her gaze. "You don't have to decide tonight." But she knew something had shifted. Nathaniel had escalated. So would she. Outside, the wind moved through the pasture grass like a warning. Inside, Evelyn Mercer felt the first true spark of counterattack. The idea of exposing Nathaniel did not let Evelyn sleep. She sat at the kitchen table long after Grayson had banked the fire. The lamp burned low. Snow pressed against the window panes. The ranch felt quiet, but the quiet was no longer peaceful. It felt like the pause before something larger. Grayson poured coffee and set a cup in front of her without speaking. He did not rush her thoughts. He waited. "I heard something," she said finally. "In Boston. A year before I left." Quote. He leaned back slightly. "Tell me." She folded her hands together to stop them from shaking. Nathaniel had a partner, Thomas Whitaker. They built an investment firm together. Whitaker started asking questions about missing funds. I overheard them arguing in the study. Nathaniel said he would handle it. She swallowed. 3 weeks later, Whitaker drowned. Grayson's expression hardened. "It was ruled an accident," she continued. "But the night before his death, I heard Nathaniel mention a payment, a large one, to someone he trusted." "Someone like the men he brought here," Grayson said. She nodded slowly. "I never had proof, just pieces. But if he's capable of that, he's capable of more." Jake arrived just after dawn, summoned by a note Grayson had sent in the night. Sheriff Brogan came an hour later. The four of them gathered around the kitchen table. "You're talking about accusing a banker of murder," the sheriff said bluntly. "I'm talking about asking questions publicly," Evelyn replied. "If he believes I'm prepared to bring up Whitaker's death in court, it will rattle him." Brogan studied her carefully. "And if you're wrong?" "Then he'll deny it," she said. "But men like him fear sunlight." Grayson spoke quietly. "He's escalating already," shot the steer. "Filing false claims. If he thinks he can intimidate her into backing down, he will keep pushing." Jake crossed his arms. "So we push back?" The sheriff exhaled slowly. "If you're going to raise this in court, you'll need more than rumor." Quote. "I know," Evelyn said, "but I can ask questions under oath." Silence followed. The plan was risky. It would change the tone of the case completely. No longer a private matter of marriage. It would become a public inquiry into Nathaniel Prescott's integrity. Sheriff Brogan finally nodded once. "Judge Harlan won't entertain wild accusations. But if you present it carefully, as concern tied to credibility, he might allow limited questioning." "That's all I need," Evelyn said. By midday, word had reached town that Friday's session would address financial misconduct allegations tied to the divorce dispute. The atmosphere shifted. The case was no longer gossip. It was scandal. Nathaniel reacted quickly. That evening, another message arrived at the ranch. This time, it was not legal paperwork. It was a short note delivered by one of his hired men. "Withdraw the slander. End this quietly, or you will regret it." Grayson read it once and set it on the table. "He's rattled," Jake said. "He's angry," Evelyn corrected. "Anger makes him reckless." "Or violent," Grayson added quietly. She looked at him. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," he answered honestly, "but not for myself." That night the watch doubled. 2 men at the south pasture, 1 at the barn. Grayson remained near the house. Evelyn refused to stay in the bedroom. She sat at the kitchen table instead, reviewing the copies she had made from Boston records. She found the transfer dates, the amounts, the sudden withdrawal that matched the week of Whitaker's death. The pieces aligned too cleanly to ignore. Around midnight, hoofbeats thundered toward the ranch. Grayson was on his feet before the knock hit the door. Sheriff Brogan burst inside without ceremony. "He's in jail," the sheriff said. Evelyn stood abruptly. "What?" "Prescott got into a fight at the hotel, accused one of his own men of incompetence, threw a glass, drew attention. Brogan's mouth tightened. I had cause to detain him for disorderly conduct." Jake gave a low whistle. "He's unraveling." "Not fully," Brogan warned. "He posted bail already, but he's losing composure." Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Nathaniel prided himself on control. For him to lose it publicly meant pressure was working. Friday morning arrived sharp and clear. The courthouse was packed tighter than before. Farmers stood shoulder to shoulder with merchants. Women filled the back benches. The atmosphere felt electric. Nathaniel sat at the defendant's table, jaw set, eyes cold. His lawyer looked strained. Judge Harlan opened proceedings briskly. "We will continue review of Mrs. Mercer's petition." Nathaniel's attorney stood first, arguing that raising unrelated financial matters was inappropriate and malicious. He described Evelyn's allegations as desperate attempts to smear a respected businessman. When he finished, Judge Harlan turned to Evelyn. "Proceed carefully," he said. She stepped forward, heart pounding but posture steady. "Your Honor, credibility matters in this case. Mr. Prescott claims I am unstable and prone to fabrication. I wish to address whether he himself has been entirely truthful in his financial dealings." Murmurs rippled through the room. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "I am not accusing without reason," Evelyn continued. "I request clarification regarding funds transferred from Mr. Prescott's account 3 days prior to the death of his business partner, Thomas Whitaker." The courtroom went still. Nathaniel rose sharply. "This is outrageous." Judge Harlan raised a hand. "Sit down." Evelyn pressed on. Mr. Whitaker, drowned under circumstances later ruled accidental. However, records show a significant payment, leaving Mr. Prescott's account and entering a private intermediary during that same week. I request that Mr. Prescott explain the nature of that transaction. Nathaniel's composure cracked visibly. "That is irrelevant to this proceeding," his lawyer insisted. "It may speak to character," Judge Harlan replied. "And character has been central to arguments made here." All eyes shifted to Nathaniel. He stood slowly. "My financial affairs are complex. Payments are made regularly. To imply wrongdoing based on coincidence is irresponsible." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "Then state clearly what the payment was for." He hesitated, only for a second. But the hesitation was seen by everyone. "It was a consulting fee," he said tightly. "For whom?" she asked. "For a contractor." "Name?" His silence stretched too long. Judge Harlan leaned forward. "Mr. Prescott, failure to answer plainly will not reflect well." Nathaniel's eyes burned into Evelyn. "You have no idea what you're inviting," he said quietly. She did not look away. "I'm inviting truth." The courtroom felt charged, like air before a lightning strike. Judge Harlan spoke firmly. "Given the gravity of this allegation, I will refer the matter for independent review. This court will not ignore potential criminal conduct." A murmur swelled again. Nathaniel's face went pale. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, he looked uncertain. The session adjourned shortly after. Outside, the crowd parted again as Evelyn stepped into daylight. This time, the looks she received were different. Less doubt, more calculation. Nathaniel exited moments later. He stopped several yards away from her. "You're making enemies you don't understand," he said quietly. She answered without raising her voice. "You already were my enemy." Grayson stepped between them slightly, not aggressively, just enough. Nathaniel's gaze flicked to him, then back to Evelyn. "This won't end how you think." "It already has," she replied. He stared at her a long moment, then turned and walked away. On the ride back to the ranch, silence held between her and Grayson. "You shook him," Jake said finally. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Good." Grayson studied her profile as they rode. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" She thought of the cellar, the locked door, the years of shrinking. "Yes," she said. "If I don't finish this now, he'll always be behind me." That night, when the nightmare came, it was different. She stood again in the cellar, but this time the door was not locked. She reached out and pushed it open herself. She woke not with a scream but with a sharp inhale. Grayson was already watching her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "He didn't have the key," she said quietly. Grayson didn't fully understand, but he saw the steadiness in her eyes. Outside, wind moved across Silver Ridge. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. Nathaniel Prescott was no longer the hunter, and Evelyn Mercer was no longer running. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By Sunday afternoon, a federal marshal arrived in Red Hollow with formal inquiries regarding Thomas Whitaker's death and the financial transfers Evelyn had raised in court. Sheriff Brogan met him at the train platform. Word spread again, but this time it carried weight rather than gossip. Nathaniel Prescott did not appear in public that day. On Monday morning, Judge Harlan reconvened the hearing. The courthouse felt smaller than before, packed beyond capacity. Even ranchers who usually avoided town lingered along the walls. Nathaniel sat at the defense table, but the composure he once wore like armor was fractured. He looked tired, strained. His lawyer's voice lacked its earlier confidence. Judge Harlan began plainly. In light of newly surfaced financial records and the referral for federal review, this court will address the dissolution of marriage without further delay. Nathaniel rose abruptly. "This is a coordinated attempt to destroy me," he said sharply. "My wife has been manipulated." Evelyn stood before being called. She did not wait to be instructed. "No," she said. "I was controlled, not manipulated." The room fell silent. She turned to face the judge. "For 7 years I was told that my thoughts were unstable, that my memories were unreliable, that bruises were imagination. That confinement was discipline. I accepted those explanations because they were repeated often enough." Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not stop. "I left because I feared for my life. I remain because I refused to return to it." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "You exaggerate." She faced him directly. "You locked me in a cellar for asking about missing funds." Gasps rose from the back of the courtroom. Judge Harlan's expression hardened. "Mr. Prescott, do you deny confinement?" Quote. Nathaniel hesitated again. The pause lasted longer this time. "It was temporary restraint during an episode," he said finally. "Restraint requires consent or medical authority," the judge replied. "Neither appears present." The federal marshal stepped forward then. "Mr. Prescott, you are required to remain in Wyoming pending review of interstate financial discrepancies." Nathaniel's face drained of color. "You have no authority." "I do," the marshal answered calmly. The weight of it settled visibly. Judge Harlan lifted his gavel. "Given evidence presented, testimony provided, and credible grounds of cruelty, this court grants the petition for divorce effective immediately." The sound of the gavel striking wood echoed sharply. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. It was done. Nathaniel took one step toward her before deputies blocked him. His eyes burned with something between rage and disbelief. "You think this makes you safe," he said under his breath. She met his gaze steadily. "It makes me free." He was escorted out moments later. No dramatic struggle. No shouted threats. Just a man walking out under guard, stripped of certainty. When the courthouse emptied, Evelyn remained standing for several seconds. The noise of the crowd faded around her. Grayson approached slowly. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though tears blurred her vision. "I don't know how to feel." "That's fair," he said. Outside, the winter air felt sharper than before. "Cleaner." Jake clapped Grayson on the shoulder. "He's finished," Jake said. "Not yet," Grayson corrected, "but he's not untouchable anymore." Sheriff Brogan joined them. "Federal review won't be quick," he said. "But if those transfers tie back to Whitaker's death, Prescott won't see Boston for a long time." Evelyn absorbed the words slowly. She had expected triumph. What she felt instead was release. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and steady. The ranch house stood where it always had, smoke rising from the chimney, fence lines stretching across open land. Grayson dismounted first and held the reins steady while she stepped down. "You don't have to stay here," he said quietly. "You're free now. You could leave. Start anywhere." She studied his face carefully. "You'd let me go?" Quote. "If that's what you needed," he answered. The truth of it struck her harder than any vow could have. She stepped closer. "I stayed because I wanted to," she said, "not because I was hiding." He nodded once. That evening the ranch felt different. Not tense, not waiting, just still. They ate supper at the kitchen table. No watch posted at the pasture. No rifle resting across Grayson's knees. Afterward, she stood near the window and watched snow drift across the fields. "He used to tell me I was nothing without him," she said quietly. Grayson joined her. "He was wrong. I know that now." Silence settled comfortably between them. Later, when she lay down to sleep, fear flickered faintly at the edge of her thoughts. Habit more than threat. She closed her eyes anyway. The dream came, but it was softer this time. She stood again in the cellar, but the walls were thinner. The door was open. Light filtered in. She walked toward it. When she woke, it was not with a scream. Dawn had begun to break across Silver Ridge, pale gold spreading over snow. Grayson was still in the chair beside her bed, though his eyes were half closed. "You stayed," she said softly. "I said I would." She studied him in the early light. "You know what's strange?" she asked. "What?" "I don't feel broken." He did not answer immediately. He simply watched her, as if weighing the words. "You were never broken," he said finally. "You were surviving." She sat up slowly. Her body felt steady, grounded. "They broke parts of me," she admitted. "But they didn't finish the job." A faint smile touched his mouth. "No, they didn't." Outside, the sun crested the ridge, spilling light across the pasture. The snow reflected it back in quiet brilliance. Evelyn swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood. For the first time in 8 months, she did not feel hunted. For the first time in 7 years, she did not feel owned. She walked to the door and opened it herself. Cold morning air rushed in, sharp and clean. Grayson rose behind her. "You ready?" he asked. She stepped onto the porch and looked out over the wide stretch of Wyoming land. "Yes," she said simply. Behind her, the man who had kept watch through every nightmare stepped into the light, and this time she did not need guarding.